Sprawling across more than 3.8 million square miles and home to over 340 million people, this nation holds some of the world's most famous skylines. From glittering towers that pierce the clouds to vast grids of neighborhoods stretching as far as the eye can see, it is a country where over 80% of the population lives in metropolitan areas, and where cities are often celebrated as symbols of opportunity, energy, and ambition. Yet, not every city here matches that image. Some cover hundreds of square miles but feel eerily spacious, with population densities far below what their size would suggest. This is the United States, and today we'll explore why 15 of its large cities remain surprisingly empty. At first glance, the idea may sound impossible. After all, aren't big cities supposed to be bustling with life, crowded streets, and non-stop movement? But here, things don't always follow that script. Some of these cities appear impressive on the map, yet feel like ghost towns when you step inside. The reasons are layered. Massive land annexations that spread residents thin, economies that rose and fell with shifting industries, geographic challenges that kept people away, and lifestyle choices that redefined where Americans want to live. And as we dive deeper into each case, you'll see that the emptiness of these places tells a larger story about the contradictions of urban life in America. 1. Anchorage, Alaska. Anchorage, Alaska stands out as perhaps the clearest example of a sprawling city that feels remarkably empty. With only about 287,000 residents, it spreads across a staggering 1,706.9 square miles, resulting in a density of just 168 people per square mile, by far one of the lowest figures for any major U.S. city. To put that in perspective, New York City has nearly 27,000 people per square mile, meaning Manhattan alone crams more people into a single block than Anchorage has in entire neighborhoods. The sheer vastness of Anchorage's municipal boundaries dilutes its population, creating the paradox of a city that looks enormous on the map, but feels sparsely inhabited on the ground. Yet the numbers only tell part of the story. Anchorage's location deep in the subarctic frontier brings unique challenges that limit growth. Harsh winters, where daylight can last less than 6 hours and temperatures plunge well below freezing, make daily life demanding. The cost of living is significantly higher than the national average, as most goods need to be imported by air or sea. Economic opportunities are also limited, heavily tied to industries like oil, military, and tourism, leaving few options for long-term stability outside these sectors. Geographic isolation further reinforces this emptiness. The nearest major U.S. city is Seattle, nearly 1,500 miles away. While Anchorage remains Alaska's largest city and a hub for travel and commerce in the state, its combination of extreme climate, high costs, and lack of diverse job growth explains why its population, though spread across immense land, has never filled it with the kind of density we associate with big cities elsewhere in America. 2. Tucson, Arizona. Tucson, Arizona is a city that often surprises people with how much space it holds compared to the number of residents who live there. With a population of roughly 547,000 spread across about 241 square miles, Tucson has a density of just 2,267 people per square mile. On paper, it is Arizona's second largest city after Phoenix. Yet when measured against its sheer size, it feels far less crowded than one might expect. For comparison, San Francisco, much smaller in area, packs more than 7 times as many people into each square mile. Tucson's vast desert setting, ringed by mountain ranges and open landscapes, gives the city a character of wide streets, sprawling neighborhoods, and low-slung development, rather than the vertical, compact feel of a dense urban center. But Tucson's low density isn't only a quirk of geography, it also reflects deeper urban patterns. Over the past decade, the city's density has actually declined by around 1.15%, even as the population grew modestly, because expansion at the edges continues to outpace infill within the city core. While this sprawl appeals to those seeking space, sunshine, and relatively affordable housing, it weakens the sense of urban concentration. At the same time, Tucson's economy has not always matched the scale of its physical footprint. Though anchored by the University of Arizona and bolstered by sectors like defense and aerospace, many residents face limited job opportunities and relatively low wages compared to the national average. This combination of wide-open land, modest growth, and economic challenges means Tucson remains a city that looks large but feels scattered, big in area, yet curiously empty when measured by density. 3. Memphis, Tennessee, the birthplace of blues and rock and roll. It sits dramatically along the Mississippi River, where barbecue smoke lingers above backyards and music still pours from Beale Street. Yet, if you step outside the nightlife districts and cultural landmarks, the scale of emptiness becomes harder to ignore. Today, Memphis is home to around 620,000 residents, but those people are spread across nearly 297 square miles, yielding a density of only about 2,086 people per square mile. Compared with cities like Chicago or San Francisco, where neighborhoods feel packed with apartment blocks and bustling sidewalks, Memphis feels strikingly spacious, even hollow in some areas. The reasons for this stretch back decades. As the 20th century wound down, Memphis saw its industrial backbone collapse. The suburban flight that followed thinned out the urban core, scattering families across Shelby County while leaving many inner-city blocks with abandoned homes and declining services. Add to this the city's persistent struggles with violent crime and limited job growth, and the result is a place that often loses residents faster than it attracts them. Since 2010, Memphis has experienced a slight density increase of about 6.5%, but that hasn't been enough to offset the decades-long population challenges. Instead, it joins other American cities on this list that look expansive on a map, but lack the crowded vitality usually associated with big city life. What do you think? Can Memphis reinvent itself and draw people back? Or will it remain one of America's great empty big cities? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. 4. Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Another city adds a fascinating chapter to the story of America's emptiest big cities, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. At first sight, it looks like a place of steady growth and opportunity. Modern office towers rise downtown, and energy companies continue to fuel the economy. Yet beneath this surface, the vastness of the city becomes almost overwhelming. Oklahoma City spans more than 606 square miles, an area larger than Los Angeles and nearly as sprawling as Houston. With a population of about 694,000 people, this translates into a population density of just 1,146 people per square mile, placing it among the least dense large cities in the country. What is striking here is not just the number itself, but how it shapes the experience of the city. Wide boulevards, large residential plots, and stretches of undeveloped land create a landscape where big does not mean crowded. Part of the reason lies in the way Oklahoma City grew. The city expanded rapidly in the post-war period, annexing large swaths of land to attract suburban-style housing and spread its tax base across a wider footprint. This made it possible for families to enjoy large yards and relatively affordable homes, but it also diluted the urban core, leaving downtown less densely packed than in many comparable cities. The challenges of density are compounded by the city's vulnerability to extreme weather, tornadoes, droughts, and severe storms often disrupt life and discourage denser development. At the same time, Oklahoma City has faced persistent social issues, higher than average rates of poverty, a large uninsured population, and ongoing struggles with substance abuse and homelessness. 5. Nashville, Tennessee. When people imagine Nashville, the first images that usually come to mind are neon-lit honky-tonks, the sound of guitars drifting from Broadway, and a city buzzing with the constant flow of tourists chasing live music. In fact, Nashville attracted more than 14 million visitors in 2022, giving the impression of a place overflowing with people at all hours of the day. But step outside the entertainment district, and a different picture emerges. One where space outweighs density, and where the daily lives of residents unfold in neighborhoods that are far less crowded than the city's lively image suggests. Despite being one of the fastest-growing cities in the American South, Nashville's nearly 700,000 residents are spread across 475 square miles, resulting in a modest density of only about 456 people per square mile. Compared with compact cities like San Francisco or Boston, where densities climb above 13,000 per square mile, Nashville feels almost open by design. This spaciousness is both a blessing and a challenge. On the one hand, the abundance of land has allowed Nashville to expand rapidly, offering newcomers affordable homes and breathing room that denser cities simply cannot provide. On the other hand, rapid population growth has created serious strains. Housing prices have surged, traffic congestion worsens with each passing year, and public schools remain underperforming relative to national averages. Much like other cities on this list, the reality of living in Nashville contrasts sharply with the bustling image it projects to outsiders. It may feel alive with visitors and music, but in terms of density, it remains firmly within the category of America's empty big cities. 6. Louisville, Kentucky. Louisville is often introduced to the world as the home of the Kentucky Derby, a city where thoroughbreds thunder down the track each May, and crowds pack into Churchill Downs for one of America's most iconic sporting spectacles. That image suggests bustle, excitement, and density, yet beyond these moments of spotlight, the city tells a quieter story. Despite being Kentucky's largest city, Louisville stretches across roughly 325 square miles, with just about 618,000 residents, yielding a density of only 1,900 people per square mile. For comparison, Boston, with fewer total residents, fits more than 6 times that density into less than 1/6 of the land area. This contrast underscores how Louisville, for all its size, embodies the paradox of a big city that often feels surprisingly empty. Much like Memphis and other cities in the Mississippi Valley, Louisville has been shaped by decades of economic shifts. Once a hub for river trade and manufacturing, it has struggled to reinvent itself at the pace of faster-growing southern metros. Population growth has stagnated, with many younger residents seeking opportunities elsewhere, while suburban expansion continues to draw families away from the urban core. Meanwhile, the city grapples with high rates of poverty and violent crime, both of which undercut efforts to attract and retain long-term residents. Even as investments in urban tourism, healthcare, and logistics have helped stabilize its economy, these sectors have not translated into the kind of density that defines thriving urban centers. 7. Fort Worth, Texas. It is often remembered as the place where the West begins, a city whose identity is wrapped in cowboy heritage, rodeos, and cattle drives that once defined the American frontier. Despite being one of the fastest-growing large cities in the United States, Fort Worth covers nearly 350 square miles, with a population of about 960,000, resulting in a density of only around 700 people per square mile. That figure may sound reasonable until you compare it to compact cities like San Francisco, which fits over 17,000 people per square mile into less than 1/7 of Fort Worth's land area. The contrast reveals the city's unique paradox: rapid growth paired with a vast sprawl that keeps it feeling emptier than its numbers suggest. This sprawl is both a blessing and a burden. On one hand, Fort Worth attracts families and businesses seeking affordable housing, plentiful land, and a slower pace than nearby Dallas, its more crowded neighbor. On the other, the spread-out nature of development dilutes urban density, leaving vast stretches of low-rise neighborhoods, highways, and open space where one might expect tighter clusters of city life. The city's history of annexing land to fuel growth has only intensified this pattern, creating one of the largest municipal footprints in the country. Add to this the challenges that come with rapid expansion, strained infrastructure, traffic congestion, rising housing costs, and pockets of poverty, and it becomes clear why Fort Worth embodies the broader theme of large U.S. cities that feel surprisingly empty. 8. Indianapolis, Indiana. When most people think of Indianapolis, their minds go straight to speed and spectacle. Home to the iconic Indianapolis 500, the city is a global symbol of racing culture and has carved out a reputation as one of America's great sports hubs. It is also the state capital of Indiana, sitting almost squarely at the heart of the Midwest, a place designed to be a crossroads both geographically and economically. Yet despite this centrality, Indianapolis reveals another side, a city that is vast in land but surprisingly light in density. With a population of about 880,000 spread across roughly 361 square miles, its density hovers around 2,400 people per square mile, far below what one might expect from a capital city, and far from the concentrated energy of places like Boston or New York. The reasons lie deep in the city's structure and history. In 1970, Indianapolis adopted what is known as Unigov, a consolidation of city and county governments that dramatically expanded its boundaries by incorporating surrounding suburban areas. This move instantly inflated the city's size, making it one of the largest by land area in the United States. But while the land grew, population density did not. Instead, the newly annexed tracts remained characterized by suburban sprawl, single-family homes, and large tracts of open space. Even within its downtown, Indianapolis struggles to project the density of other major cities. Though revitalization projects, sports arenas, and a growing cultural district have drawn more activity, the city's population growth has remained steady rather than explosive. 9. Jacksonville, Florida. Covering nearly 747 square miles, Jacksonville is so large that it is only about 1/4 smaller than the entire state of Rhode Island. Yet, despite this massive footprint, the city's population of about 970,000 feels surprisingly thin when spread out. This leaves Jacksonville with a population density of only around 300 residents per square mile, a figure that would be considered modest even in smaller American towns. For a city that ranks among the nation's largest by land area, such sparse distribution creates the paradox of being both one of the biggest and one of the emptiest. Much of this comes from the unique consolidation of Jacksonville's city and county governments back in 1968, which gave it control over a vast area that includes both urban neighborhoods and wide stretches of suburban and even rural land. Despite the low density, Jacksonville is not a stagnant city. Over the past decade, its population has surged by more than 18%, driven largely by its affordable cost of living compared to other Florida cities, as well as its position as a growing hub for logistics, military presence, and healthcare. Yet this growth has not been enough to erase the sense of emptiness that defines it. Long commutes, underdeveloped public transit, and a lack of central density mean that daily life feels spread thin, with much of the vibrancy concentrated in pockets rather than in a strong urban core. If you find these hidden sides of big cities intriguing, consider subscribing so you can discover more places that defy expectations. 10. Kansas City, Missouri. Kansas City presents a puzzle for anyone who assumes that the largest city in a state must also feel busy and crowded. Despite covering an impressive 340.7 square miles, which makes it significantly larger in area than many better-known urban centers, its population of about 510,000 translates into just 1,619 people per square mile. This relatively low density creates a striking sense of openness that can surprise visitors expecting the hustle and congestion of a city of its stature. Much of the development here has historically stretched outward rather than upward, with suburban neighborhoods and sprawling commercial zones diluting what might otherwise have been a concentrated downtown core. The story behind this thin spread is complex. Kansas City's metropolitan region has certainly grown, but the majority of that growth has taken place in the surrounding suburbs, leaving the central areas less dense than statistics alone might suggest. Challenges such as persistent crime, uneven job opportunities, and pockets of poverty have further discouraged a stronger concentration of residents in the urban heart of the city. At the same time, the expansive footprint of Kansas City reflects both historic annexations and a preference for space, making it possible to live within city limits while still experiencing something closer to suburban life. This duality of scale and emptiness is what makes Kansas City such an intriguing example of why some of the country's biggest cities can still feel remarkably uncrowded, despite their size on the map. 11. Virginia Beach, Virginia. Often confuses the imagination because the image most people carry of Virginia Beach is one of lively boardwalks, crowded beaches, and millions of tourists filling its streets each summer. Yet behind this picture of constant activity lies a permanent population that tells a very different story. With only about 455,000 residents spread out across an expansive 244 square miles, the city's population density averages just 1,862 people per square mile. That means much of the built environment is quieter and more spacious than visitors might expect, especially once the tourist season fades and the hotels empty out. What makes the contrast even sharper is the annual influx of nearly 14 million visitors, whose presence gives the impression of a city bursting at the seams, when in fact its day-to-day population is relatively thin for such a large footprint. This sense of emptiness is not accidental, but rather a product of both geography and planning. Virginia Beach's growth has historically been shaped by tourism and military presence, rather than by the dense residential development seen in older industrial cities. This sprawling design makes it possible for large numbers of visitors to flow in and out each year, but it also means that permanent residents are widely dispersed. Even in the more built-up sections, the density does not compare to cities of similar size elsewhere, where populations are clustered tightly in vertical housing. 12. New Orleans, Louisiana. For many outsiders, this place feels like a place that should be bursting at the seams, alive with residents who embody the rhythms of the French Quarter and the traditions of the Bayou. Yet behind that colorful image lies a more sobering demographic reality. With just over 370,000 residents spread across roughly 169 square miles, New Orleans maintains a population density of about 2,200 people per square mile, relatively low compared with other major cities that hold similar cultural prominence. The impression of constant activity often comes from its more than 18 million annual visitors, who temporarily swell the city's presence, while in truth many neighborhoods remain quieter and more spacious than the world-famous celebrations would imply. Few urban centers in the United States are so directly shaped by geography, and New Orleans' position below sea level has made it acutely vulnerable to flooding. Hurricane Katrina in 2005 forced a massive displacement of residents, with the city losing more than half its population in the aftermath. And although some recovery has taken place, the numbers have never fully returned to pre-storm levels. Even decades later, certain neighborhoods show visible scars, vacant lots, abandoned homes, and slow rebuilding, which collectively keep population density lower than its size would suggest. Add to this a pattern of suburban migration, where families settle in surrounding parishes rather than within the city proper, and the wide gaps between bustling tourist districts and quieter residential areas become even more apparent. 13. Tulsa, Oklahoma, a city whose name might be familiar yet often slips under the radar when people think of America's great urban centers. Unlike the coastal metropolises that dominate global attention, Tulsa sits quietly in the heart of the country, shaped by wide open spaces and a legacy built on oil wealth. On paper, with a population of more than 410,000 residents and a land area of around 201 square miles, one might expect the streets to feel lively and crowded. Instead, Tulsa averages just over 2,000 people per square mile, a figure that places it among the nation's more sparsely populated large cities, where vast neighborhoods spread out horizontally rather than rising vertically. This sense of emptiness stems in part from the way Tulsa grew during the oil boom of the early 20th century. Wealth from petroleum brought grand buildings and cultural institutions, but the city expanded outward instead of upward, with developers favoring sprawling plots and detached homes over dense urban cores. As industry shifted and the city diversified beyond oil, that spatial pattern remained, leaving Tulsa with an urban footprint larger than its population could ever truly fill. Many residents live on the fringes, commuting inward rather than clustering in the heart of the city, and suburban-style layouts ensure that density remains low. So Tulsa is still large enough to be called a major urban center, but empty enough in feel that it rarely carries the bustle people associate with metropolitan life. 14. Lexington, Kentucky. Known worldwide for its connection to horses and bluegrass pastures, the city thrives on images of rolling fields and the elegance of thoroughbred breeding, painting a picture quite unlike the dense metropolises that dominate modern imagination. With more than 320,000 residents stretched across an expansive 285 square miles, however, Lexington does not deliver the bustling density its population might suggest. Instead, the city feels vast and airy, as though its urban identity is scattered across both rural charm and suburban comfort, making it a unique case among America's larger cities. Part of this character comes from the deliberate preservation of the surrounding landscape. Lexington has fiercely protected its horse farms and open lands through zoning regulations that limit development across large swaths of its territory. While this has safeguarded the region's global reputation in equine culture, it has also constrained urban growth and pushed the city to expand outward rather than concentrate inward. The result is a metropolis that covers an impressive area but feels spread thin, with districts that often blend into farmland and neighborhoods where houses sit far apart compared to more traditional urban centers. This unique balance of city and country creates both charm and emptiness. Visitors can experience bustling downtown streets with galleries, bourbon bars, and restaurants, only to drive a few minutes and find themselves surrounded by acres of quiet fields. It is this juxtaposition that places Lexington among the so-called empty big cities, where population and land size do not quite align to create the density one might expect. 15. Tallahassee, Florida. At first glance, this area might not seem like an obvious candidate for a city that feels strangely underpopulated, given that it is not only the capital of Florida but also the hub of government, education, and regional culture. Yet Tallahassee's story fits seamlessly into the broader puzzle of why some of the country's largest urban areas seem curiously empty when compared to their size. With a population of around 201,000 spread over nearly 103 square miles, the city's density sits at roughly 1,950 people per square mile, a figure far lower than the perception of a bustling capital might suggest. Unlike coastal cities that attract millions through tourism or commerce, Tallahassee's appeal has long been tied to its political institutions and universities, especially Florida State University and Florida A&M University. This means that much of its activity is seasonal and fluctuates with legislative sessions or the academic calendar, leaving the city quieter outside these peaks. Part of Tallahassee's spaciousness also comes from its geography and development patterns. Nestled in the Panhandle region, it is surrounded by rolling hills and dense forests, creating a blend of suburban sprawl and preserved green landscapes that limit the sensation of crowding. While it has experienced steady growth over the years, expansion has spread outward rather than upward, reinforcing a landscape of low-rise neighborhoods, wide boulevards, and areas of open land that dilute the impression of density. The city also lacks the tourism-driven buzz that defines much of Florida, with visitors often skipping over the capital in favor of destinations like Orlando, Miami, or Tampa. When we step back and look at all 15 of these cities together, a pattern begins to emerge. Each of them carries the weight of history, identity, and significance, whether as capitals, cultural hubs, industrial engines, or centers of education. Yet, despite their importance, their wide footprints, sprawling neighborhoods, and shifting economic realities leave them feeling far less crowded than one might expect for places of their size. This contrast reminds us that density and vitality often come not from size alone, but from the ways people choose to gather, build communities, and breathe life into the spaces they inhabit. So if you enjoy uncovering stories that challenge what we think we know about other cities, make sure to follow the channel for more surprising insights waiting just around the corner.